Today, we're diving into the story of Naamah, a fascinating figure from the Old Testament. Naamah was an Ammonite princess, the daughter of Hanun, the king of the Ammonites. Her tale is chronicled in the first book of Kings, specifically in chapters 14 verse 21 to 31. According to scripture, Naamah became the wife of King Solomon, the renowned monarch of Israel celebrated for his extraordinary wisdom and wealth. Although much of her life remains shrouded in mystery, both the Bible and Jewish tradition provide enough context for us to piece together her story. Before we continue, we'd appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. It really helps us out. Naamah, as the daughter of royalty, grew up in luxury and privilege. Her marriage to King Solomon was a significant political and diplomatic event, especially given the tense history between the Israelites and the Ammonites. For context, the Ammonites, according to biblical tradition, were often seen as enemies of Israel. Their ancestry was traced back to Lot, the nephew of Abraham, and their interactions with Israel were frequently marked by hostility. When Solomon married Naamah, an Ammonite princess, his decision sparked controversy. Many conservative Israelites were concerned about the implications of this union, fearing that it could lead to compromises in the purity of their faith and traditions. To fully grasp this story, it's worth noting that Solomon's marriage to Naamah wasn't his first controversial union. He had previously married the daughter of Pharaoh, a union that, though legitimate by royal standards, marked the beginning of his pattern of marrying women from different nations. Over time, Solomon's lack of restraint became evident as he amassed an astonishing number of wives and concubines. According to 1 Kings 11 verse 3, he had 700 wives of royal lineage and 300 concubines. Despite warnings from his mother about the dangers of such unions, Solomon ignored her advice. He continued forming relationships with women from various nations, including the Moabites, Hittites, and Ammonites, many of whom practiced religions foreign to Judaism. Naamah, however, was particularly beloved by Solomon, and his deep affection for her would have profound consequences. Solomon's love for Naamah went beyond mere politics or diplomacy. His devotion to her led him to make choices that would negatively impact both his own faith and the stability of his kingdom. Under Naamah's influence, Solomon allowed the worship of foreign gods, even going so far as to adopt the customs of her culture. In doing so, he compromised the core tenets of Judaism, forsaking the principles that had once defined his reign. The Bible tells us that although Solomon started his reign as a devout follower of God, he gradually strayed. His relationships with foreign wives, including Naamah, led him to build altars for their gods. This marked a significant spiritual decline, not just for Solomon personally, but for the kingdom as a whole. It's important to remember that Solomon wasn't the first Israelite king to deviate in this way. His father, King David, also had multiple wives, suggesting a precedent for such behavior. However, the Bible explicitly warned against this in Deuteronomy 17 verse 17, where it cautions Israelite kings against taking many wives, as it would lead them astray. Despite being celebrated for his wisdom, Solomon ignored this guidance, allowing his heart to be influenced by external temptations. Interestingly, Solomon's wisdom, which earned him widespread admiration, was legendary. One of the most famous stories about his intelligence involves two women disputing the maternity of a baby. Solomon's proposal to divide the child in two revealed the true mother's identity, as she was willing to sacrifice her claim to save the child's life. Beyond his judicial acumen, Solomon's knowledge extended to various fields, including nature and the arts. His contributions are documented in the Book of Proverbs and the Song of Solomon. Despite his early successes, Solomon's reign ended on a turbulent note. A prophet named Ahijah had a vision foretelling that the kingdom would be divided after Solomon's death. According to the prophecy, Jeroboam, one of Solomon's servants, would rule over 10 of Israel's tribes, while Solomon's lineage would retain control of just one tribe. When Solomon learned of this prophecy, he perceived Jeroboam as a threat to his reign and even tried to have him killed. This desperate act highlighted the growing instability within his kingdom. After Solomon's death, his son Rehoboam ascended to the throne. However, Rehoboam's poor leadership and disregard for his people's grievances set the stage for further conflict. After Solomon's death, his son Rehoboam ascended to the throne. Rehoboam's rule began with significant tension. As the people of Israel approached him to request relief from the heavy taxes and labor burdens that Solomon had imposed during his reign, they hoped the new king would offer a lighter hand and restore balance to their lives. Initially, Rehoboam sought counsel from two groups. The older, more experienced advisors urged him to heed the people's concerns and govern with fairness, suggesting that a compassionate response would secure their loyalty. However, Rehoboam rejected their advice and instead listened to the younger advisors, who encouraged him to assert his authority by increasing the burdens on the people. In response, Rehoboam declared that he would rule even more harshly than his father, famously stating that while Solomon chastised them with whips, he would chastise them with scorpions. This decision proved disastrous. The people, feeling betrayed and unheard, rebelled against Rehoboam's authority. This rebellion marked the fulfillment of Ahijah's prophecy, as 10 of the 12 tribes rejected Rehoboam and declared Jeroboam as their king, forming the northern kingdom of Israel. Rehoboam retained control over the southern kingdom of Judah, which consisted primarily of the tribes of Judah and Benjamin, but the unity of the kingdom was irreparably shattered. This division, known as the Great Schism, was a defining moment in Israel's history. The northern kingdom, led by Jeroboam, established its capital in Samaria, while the southern kingdom, ruled by Rehoboam, continued to hold Jerusalem as its spiritual and political center. The split not only had political ramifications but also deepened religious divisions between the two kingdoms. In an effort to consolidate his power and prevent his people from traveling to Jerusalem to worship at the temple, Jeroboam took a controversial and ultimately destructive step. He constructed 2 golden calves and placed them at altars in Bethel and Dan, declaring these idols to be the gods who had brought the Israelites out of Egypt. Jeroboam encouraged the people to worship these idols instead of traveling to Jerusalem, fearing that continued pilgrimages to the temple would weaken his control over the northern tribes. This decision marked a turning point in the spiritual life of Israel. The golden calves became enduring symbols of idolatry and apostasy, representing a rejection of the true God in favor of man-made images. Jeroboam's actions set a precedent for idolatrous practices that would plague the northern kingdom for generations. One day, while Jeroboam was offering sacrifices at one of these altars, an unnamed prophet arrived with a dire message. The prophet proclaimed that a future descendant of David would desecrate these pagan altars, burning human bones on them as a sign of their defilement. This shocking prophecy underscored the gravity of Israel's spiritual decline and served as a warning of the consequences of turning away from God. In an attempt to silence the prophet, Jeroboam stretched out his hand to seize him, but in doing so his hand withered and became paralyzed. Witnessing this miracle, Jeroboam pleaded with the prophet to pray to God for his healing. The prophet obliged and Jeroboam's hand was restored, but the incident did little to change his ways. He continued to lead Israel down a path of idolatry and rebellion against God. Centuries later, this prophecy was fulfilled during the reign of King Josiah of Judah. Josiah, a devout follower of God, initiated sweeping reforms to rid Judah and the remnants of Israel of idolatry. He destroyed the altars erected by Jeroboam and desecrated them by burning human bones on them, just as the unnamed prophet had foretold. Josiah's actions marked a brief but significant return to the worship of the one true God, though the spiritual decline initiated by Jeroboam left a lasting scar on Israel's history. Returning to the story of Solomon and Naamah, their union serves as a cautionary tale about the consequences of allowing external influences to erode one's faith and principles. Solomon's love for Naamah, though sincere, led him to compromise the core tenets of his religion. By building altars to foreign gods and permitting the worship of idols, Solomon set a precedent that would have dire repercussions for Israel. His decisions contributed to the spiritual and political instability that culminated in the kingdom's division. The story of Naamah highlights the profound impact that personal relationships and alliances can have on both individuals and nations. Even a ruler as wise and accomplished as Solomon was not immune to the consequences of his choices. His story reminds us that wisdom alone is not enough to safeguard one's values. Steadfast devotion and adherence to principles are equally vital. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of Naamah and her influence on King Solomon's life. If you found this narrative thought-provoking, please consider subscribing to our channel and giving this video a like. Your support allows us to continue creating content that delves into the rich and timeless lessons of biblical history. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your perspective and suggestions for future topics. Together, let's continue uncovering the profound stories and teachings that have shaped history. Stay tuned for more and have a wonderful day.